Let's talk about a weird and honestly super frustrating paradox. The idea that not having money can somehow end up costing you way more money. I know, it sounds totally backward, right? But it's a very real trap that millions of people get caught in every single day.
You know that feeling, that pit in your stomach when just one tiny thing goes wrong and suddenly it feels like it could wreck your entire month, maybe even your whole year? Yeah, let's walk through a story that might hit a little too close to home.
So, it all starts with that dreaded check engine light. You take your car to the mechanic, and they tell you, hey, it's a pretty quick fix. It's going to be about $300. Okay, annoying, but manageable. But then you look at your bank account, and you just don't have it. Not right now. So you think, okay, I'll just wait. Fast forward a couple of months. That small problem you ignored, well, it just snowballed. The car completely dies on the highway. So now you're on the hook for a tow truck, a much bigger repair because that little issue wrecked the transmission, and on top of all that, you've lost wages from missing work. Your $300 problem just exploded into a $2,500 catastrophe.
And here's the most important part of that whole story. What just happened wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just a string of bad luck. It is a predictable, measurable, and absolutely suffocating cost that comes from not having the money in the first place. It's a trap, and it's built on simple, brutal math.
So that whole check engine light nightmare, that's our first piece of evidence. It's a perfect modern-day example of a theory that was actually laid out brilliantly decades ago in a fantasy novel of all places.
And that brings us to the actual name for this whole phenomenon. It's called the Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. Sounds a bit academic, I know, but let's break down what it really means.
So at its heart, the theory is really simple. It says that if you can't afford quality up front, you're forced into this endless cycle of buying cheap, disposable stuff over and over and over again, which in the end costs you way more.
And this idea comes from the amazing author Terry Pratchett. In one of his books, a character named Sam Vimes just lays out this perfect, simple explanation for a really complex economic reality. It's just genius.
And this is how he explains it. It's all about the math. See, a rich man can afford a $50 pair of boots that'll last him 10 years. But a poor man, he can only afford $10 boots, and those fall apart after maybe one season. So over those same 10 years, the poor man has to keep buying those cheap boots. He ends up spending $100, and his feet are still wet half the time. He has literally paid double for something worth. Now, obviously, this isn't just a clever story about boots. This exact dynamic is woven into pretty much every part of our modern economy. Let's look at a few examples of what some people call the poverty premium.
The poverty premium. It's like a hidden tax you have to pay on everyday things just because you can't afford to buy them in the most efficient way. You are effectively being charged a penalty for not having money.
I mean, this applies to the most basic stuff you can think of. Toilet paper, right? If you've got the cash and the storage space to buy in bulk, maybe you pay 50 cents a roll. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck and can only afford one single roll from the corner store, you could be paying $1.50. That's 3 times more for the exact same product.
And honestly, it gets a lot darker when we start looking at financial services. The modern banking system, a lot of the time, seems like it's specifically designed to pull fees from the people who are the most vulnerable, the ones with the smallest financial cushion.
Just think about an overdraft fee for a second. Let's say a $25 charge hits your account, but you only have $20 in there. So you've basically borrowed $5, and for that, the bank smacks you with a $35 fee. Well, if you calculate that as an annual percentage rate, an APR, it comes out to a mind-blowing 700%. It's a quiet transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top, all disguised as a simple service fee.
And you know, this isn't just about the math of money, it's also about the math of our own minds. There's a ton of research showing that constant financial stress puts your brain into something called a scarcity mindset. So when you're in this state, your functional IQ can temporarily drop by about 13 points. That's basically the equivalent of losing an entire night of sleep. Your brain is so laser-focused on just surviving today that it physically loses the bandwidth to make good, long-term decisions. This is why someone in a crisis might take out a terrible payday loan. It's not a moral failing. It's a cognitive one.
You see the same logic play out with big purchases, like a car. If you've got good credit, you can get a low-interest loan on a solid, reliable vehicle. But if you have no savings, you might get pushed into a buy here, pay here lot, where you're paying a crazy 24% interest rate for a clunker that needs constant repairs. You end up paying double for a car that barely runs.
And housing. Wow, housing might be the ultimate Boots theory example. When you rent, you are paying 100% interest. Every single dollar is gone forever. None of it builds any equity for you. You can get trapped paying $2,000 a month in rent for a house that would only cost $1,200 a month on a mortgage, all because you can't get together that initial down payment.
Okay, I know. Understanding this system is, well, it's depressing. But it's also the absolute first step toward beating it. You can't win a game if you don't even know the rules. So, the real question is, how do you start to fight back?
I think the most important mindset shift you can make is this. Your first goal isn't about getting rich or playing the stock market. No, it's about strategically stopping the financial bleeding. Think about it. Escaping a 20% interest rate on a credit card is a guaranteed 20% return on your money. No stock market investment can promise you that.
So what's the tool? What's the key to all this? It's the buffer. That first small emergency fund isn't just boring financial advice your parents gave you. It is literally the weapon that breaks the cycle. It's the thing that lets you fix that check engine light for $300 instead of letting it spiral into a $2,500 disaster.
So here's a simple, actionable plan. First, you have to audit your life for what we can call vampire costs. The late fees, the overdrafts, the high interest payments that only exist because you don't have that cushion. Second, focus every single spare dollar on building your buffer. Then, once you have it, you use it to plug the biggest, most expensive leak first.
See, the whole system is counting on you to keep paying those penalties. It's profitable. But when you build that buffer and you start making decisions based on the total long-term cost, you suddenly stop being a good customer for all these predatory systems. You start being the CFO of your own life.
So I'll leave you with a question to really think about. Take a hard look at your own expenses. What is the most expensive, cheap thing in your life? What's the one thing you keep buying the cheap version of that you know is secretly costing you a fortune? Because identifying your own $10 boots is the first step to finally being able to afford the pair that lasts.